All right. Good afternoon. This is Committee on Administration meeting, our monthly meeting for the month of March. We are here in the Dunn County Government Building in room 54. If I may, Chris, our county manager, would please call the roll, if you would.
Supervisor Bauer.
Here.
Supervisor Headland.
Here.
Supervisor Lino.
Here.
Supervisor Rogers.
Yes.
Supervisor Zons.
Yes.
Okay.
All are present and accounted for.
Thank you very much, Chris. All right. Approval of the meeting minutes. Our last meeting was from February. Any corrections? Wants to make from those minutes?
Also move.
So move to approve.
Approve.
Second. All in favor, aye. Any opposed? Hearing none. Unanimous approval. Thank you all. Public comments. Do we have any public comments, either present or that were sent in?
None were sent in.
Okay, thank you. Staff reports. Again, we always receive staff reports in writing from the Department of Administration, Human Resources, our Criminal Justice Collaboration Division, Treasurer, our County Clerk, our IT department, and our Corporation Counsel. Anyone have any questions on any of those reports?
I was just wondering if Jen Lee would go through some of these charts, if you wouldn't mind. Because I went through them, but maybe more explanation. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bauer. We're going to hear from our Director of Human Resources. I just had that problem.
All right. Sorry about that. So I did jot down some highlights to point out within these reports because I know it can be a bit overwhelming, but we have some really positive things to share with regard specifically to the health insurance plan. So I wanted to point out, I believe it would be page 6 of the packet. And it looks like this. It's called the Health Plan Performance Monitor. So if we look at that percentage up in the upper left-hand corner, that's 76.1%. What that means is that 76.1% of what was expected to be paid was actually paid. So that's basically projected versus actual. And that's how that was sitting as of December 31st of 2022. I do want to make note that there is still some claims from 2022 being processed in the first couple months of 2023, which is typical. But we can expect probably to land close to the 80% mark, all said and done, is what's expected there. So on the right-hand side, you can kind of see the breakdown of the costs that were expended for the year. So the net claims were at $3,373,466. And what net means is basically the claims that were expended, and then you subtract anything that was reimbursed in stop loss dollars. And then we have our fixed costs, of course, and the prescription drug costs, all contributing to the total plan cost of $5,222,030. And again, that can move a little bit just with the run out of claims. Any questions on this page specifically?
Not necessarily this page, but as I was looking at the charts, why is December always so high?
It can be pretty typical just because by the end of the year, most members are hitting their deductible, right? So then there's more of I'm going to say burden, but for lack of a better word, burden on the plan to cover the cost of the claims just because they had already met their deductible for the year. And also we kind of see a spike with people like, oh, I better get in before the end of the year because I've already met my deductible and things like that. It can be pretty common.
I also have one other question too, is I noticed, I saw something about a sleep study that was linked in there. And then I'm going, the number was like 2,400 and I'm going, we did 2,400 sleep studies? Or that was just a total disbursement?
So I believe you're referring to the Reform Medicine report. So
Yeah,
let me
that-
just page through that.
Yeah.
Let's see here.
Sorry, I didn't mean to get off page here, but
Oh, that's okay. Oh, okay. Actually, this is one of the pages I wanted to outline. So I believe it's on page 18 of the agenda items. So what this page is indicating basically is in the green. These are the services that Reform Medicine actually provided to our members in 2022. And those are the costs associated with those. So you can see that sleep studies cost us a total of $400 for the year in 2022. And what our representative from Reform had done for us was some analysis between the costs that we've expended to Reform for those certain services compared to what it would have costed at Mayo, which is one of the most common providers that our members see outside of Reform. So what that tells us is we spent 400. Had those patients gone to Mayo, we would have spent 2,416
okay,
instead. So we didn't actually spend what's listed in the gray column.
all right.
It's just meant to be a comparison.
That gave me heart failure. I just wondered if we had that much sleep apnea around here. That's all.
No, no.
Okay.
But I did want to point out this slide specifically because you can see there's a pretty significant anticipated savings in, the services that were completed at Reform versus what it could have cost at Mayo. And so she arrived at a savings of 51% for that. And that's including our membership fees for Reform Medicine. Any questions on that slide? Sure.
How can the labs be that much cheaper? I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's astonishing. We can see too I wanted to point out the page 22, if I may, under opportunities, you can see she was even able to include that there were $192,503 expended in labs that took place outside of Reform in 2022. So that's an opportunity for us to be able to focus on promoting Reform more for people to go get their labs done there just because of how drastic that savings could be. So, I mean, we see a significant savings that actually took place, but there's even more opportunity for that just with how much of a difference in cost it is. I can't speak to exactly why it costs so much more at larger providers, but it's definitely a significant savings.
Jenna, this is Vaughn. One of the things I think, which, not defending anybody for the cost, certainly because I'm sure that Mayo is higher, but is the extent. I would guess that there are some labs that could not be done even at Reform had they wanted to do them.
Certainly in an emergency setting, of course, or, anything like that. So it's hard to really pick apart, how much of that 192,000 could have taken place at Reform, but we can gather that there were likely some opportunities there for more utilization at Reform. But overall, they communicated that we've blown the norm out of the water for the first year of utilization at Reform Medicine. So that's really exciting. I think we can see here in this cost comparison that the membership more than paid for itself in the first year. And that's more than we could have expected.
What is fixed cost?
Okay, so going back to the page 6, is that what you're, okay. So fixed costs would include administrative fees with the third-party administrator, as well as stop loss premiums. So we pay a premium for each member, basically that would ensure if they had accrued high claims within the certain year. And then we also have an aggregate stop loss as well. So if you page through, I know there's a lot of numbers here. The next page, so that would be page 7, does break down those fixed. Oh, I'm sorry about that. That would be page 8, breaks down the fixed costs between the administration fees, stop loss premiums, and then what's called a provider network fee. So that's what we pay to have our network, which is the Alliance Trilogy. And that is a really robust network that allows a wide variety of providers in this area. Did that help answer your question? Okay, yep.
Anything else from any of the supervisors for Jenna? Jenna, you got some other stuff. Is there anything else that you want to do while you're up there?
Oh, we're on the same page. Those were the slides I wanted to point out. So I appreciate your review of that. And we're excited to keep you updated as the second year moves on. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any questions for any of the other departments? Mr. Bauer.
I'm sorry, for corporate counsel, I was looking at the Taylor Lake District.
Yes.
You're saying that guy had one of your members work on it for 6 months?
Well, she worked on other stuff too, but.
The
it
process
was-
took over 6 months, okay, but
Yeah, it
wasn't
was
just,
over the
okay,
course
didn't,
of 6 months when she began working on it until the county board voted to approve the Lake Rehabilitation District.
okay,
So it was just an activity that took quite a long time and an investment of time, research and.
and was there cost involved in that at all for the county itself, or was that outside
No,
county?
I mean, other than salaries of staff who worked on it, the conservationist was heavily involved in it. I mean.
I
no-
just
no-
seen 6 months of work, that's a long time.
Oh, It just took that long. That may, that's kind of misleading, but it was a long thing.
Okay.
It just took from beginning to end. It was a long project.
Yeah, thank you.
Go ahead, Tim.
All right, this is in regards to Chris's report. One of the things I wanted to commend you for was going to all of the committee meetings. Those are a lot of them, and I want to give you kudos for that because it really kind of gives you an idea of what's happening in each one of the committees prior to the executive committee, when all of a sudden now it all comes home to roost. But I really wanted you to elaborate a little bit. You went to the Taylor Lake meeting and the watershed meeting recently. I would just wonder if you could elaborate on that a little.
So partly I went to the Taylor Lake meeting because we agreed that they could hold their first meeting here. And so they met in our facility and it was in the evening, and I didn't want anyone else to have to necessarily be responsible for my saying they could use the space. So, and as it turned out, we did, we just helped them with some accommodations and kind of making that all free flow well for them. So it was well attended. And it was a conducive meeting. Plus, it was the end of the process that I also had been sat through all the PRD meetings and, all the board actions to get to the end process. And it was like, I'm just really curious as to how this now actually begins to take life and be a true a true lake district. So, so that was that meeting. And then, I went to the watershed conference, because it really does touch so much of the work that we do as a county. I mean, it's certainly, it was a priority in the directional plan with regard to just the quality of our water and, tending to that, but also, so much of the work that happens in our environmental services group and, and planning resources and development, all of those pieces, it just felt like, and I've heard about it for years, and it was totally irrelevant to anything that I was even remotely connected to, but, it was a great day. It's a very interesting day.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I would just note one other thing. We do have a celebrity in our front, in our presence, who is on the front page of the Leader Telegram this morning.
That's good.
So, Doug Mel with our communications planning, with our communication efforts, did a press release yesterday morning on the use of Badger books. And then that got picked up by, so Andrew did a, interview with WQOW yesterday afternoon, and was on the news last night. And then, Leader Telegram ran the article, ran the press release this morning. So we're getting great bang for our buck. Pretty much everything we put out gets picked up. And partly that's just Doug's skill in crafting it in a manner in which it's just easily usable for the media resources. But I think that there are things that I wouldn't necessarily have time for. He does them. We identify them. We have a work group with Supervisor Zons and Dan Dunbar and Krista Vind and myself and Doug, and we meet at the beginning of the month and sort of identify priorities for the month of things that we'd like to tend to and build some information out, get some information out and about. And he works on them throughout the month, and it's just been very, very successful in getting some positive media play on the great work that happens here every day.
Thank you. Anything else?
Yeah, I have one other,
ahead.
two other items actually. Asking Nick, what is e-filing?
Back in the old days, when I started practicing law,
Mm-hmm.
you prepared paper documents and you had to carry them over to the courthouse or mail them over to the courthouse and present them to the clerk, and they would stamp them as filed, and you'd have to mail copies out to everyone. Technology has advanced to the point now where documents are generally required to be filed electronically. So you have to prepare PDF documents electronically, sign them, and then you have to submit them in a queue. And then the clerk receives them, their staff will review them and electronically mark them as filed. And then you have to disseminate the documents that you file to the other parties in the case. And so that's a process that has been evolving. It's very easy to think, well, you just log in and file your electronic documents, but you have staff who prepare documents and attorneys review them. So you have to decide who's going to have access. And then in the case of county government, for example, you have matters involving children who need protection, people receiving public assistance benefits, child support services, mental health treatment, case management under guardianship or protective placement, or just, disabled adults and minors. And so you have people preparing documents from all these different areas who cannot be allowed to see each other's work. So we have to, there are fences set up to facilitate the smooth sailing of that process of getting things filed. With respect to what's in the report, it was just some adjustments that had to be made in order to accommodate changes in so some of the fences are created by the court system. Some of the fences are ones that we create. We try to create processes where we can share documents with the correct county staff and get them filed in a timely manner. And it's just one of the things that, because the state changed some of their processes, we had to work through revising what we do here too, to make sure that everybody who's involved with documents that are going to court can stay involved to the extent that they need to, for drafting or providing information or reviewing. So that's, e-filing is filing stuff in court.
Okay, let's say you've got some elderly people or whatever like that, do we have a mechanism to assist folks who really aren't savvy in that regard?
No, I think I'm speculating here a little. But I think the court system recognizes that not everyone has the equipment or the ability to utilize e-filing, and so there are exceptions made for those folks. But attorneys are not on that list at all. So
Even the old ones, huh?
yeah, that's right. So we're expected to have computers and internet and use it.
Okay. Couple other questions. You'd also in your report mentioned that we're having a hard time chasing down public defenders. Just wondering where we're going with that, and then also a replacement for Nicole.
Well, the public defenders is kind of out of it's out of our area. It's relevant in the sense that it has created a fair amount of additional work for county social workers, county attorneys, because cases will get filed and there are no attorneys available to represent the parties in those cases. And so under the law, you got to have court hearings within a certain time. And if you don't have the hearing, then the case has to get dismissed. And then, so we've had to refile cases on occasion just because there aren't any attorneys to take the case on behalf of the other people in the case. So we've just had to refile. So that's been a time consuming, it's taken extra time and resources. And as far as Nicole's last day of work was yesterday. So I've spoken with HR, and my plan is to wait until the end of March to make a requisition to fill the position, and then with HR have approximately 60 days of recruitment. Part of that is just because it really can't go any much faster than that. And we want to make sure that, we get a number of qualified applicants to review.
Hopefully we'll have some.
Yes. And part of it is just a sort of bending toward being conscientious with budget, so I decided to wait. Instead of doing it immediately, I decided to wait until the end of March instead of starting it right in, I guess it would have been like the first week of March. So there's 3 weeks in there where I'm kind of sitting on my hands. But my plan is next week to send the requisition to HR. And then they'll get to work on it. And then I'd like to see about a 60-day recruitment period.
All right.
Just to make sure we get a good, a good list of applicants.
Okay. One other question, if I may, Mr. Chair.
Certainly.
All right. just kind of wondering, contacting you, Tech. I'm just kind of wondering if, I read a report here about some yahoos that cut, cell tower cable down and the tower went down. How does that affect our emergency communication in the area if we've got somebody like that? Okay, I mean, are we like dead in the water, or do we have backup? You know, the thing switched somewhere else or what? Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. All right. All right.
It's only because you decided to come.
Karma.
Okay, so yeah, that it's definitely a concern. Dunn County owns one tower. And that tower is right here in the city of Menominee, by the rec park. The rest of the towers that we have are emergency communications on our actually towers that we lease. So I don't want to say that we don't have a lot of control over some of the security, but probably a little bit less control over it. It definitely is a concern. Some of our towers, definitely do have kind of a backup system or a rollover system, as we would call it, especially the law enforcement channels. For the sheriff's office, they have a little bit of a rollover system to them. So if we have a failure, let's just say at the Rock Falls Tower, the law enforcement radio should sense that there has been a loss of connection to that tower for whatever reason, and it will search for the next best tower that it can communicate with. Now, depending on it, I mean, there may not be one that's really optimal, but they are designed to rotate and kind of look for the next best option in that area. We already do have some deficiencies in our county, kind of up in that Connorsville, New Haven Township area. So if we lost, let's just say the Wheeler Tower, which is kind of our prominent tower in the north, that would probably just increase that circle that's already kind of what we call a dead spot. Just because we do have a little bit of a deficiency in that area. But for the rest of the law enforcement channels like that, currently there is, a system built in to accommodate some sort of failure, be it, just from the repeaters themselves, or like that, if a tower would be damaged or would go down. The Dunn Fire EMS frequencies that we manage, that has a little less redundancy in those. So if we would have an issue at a tower site with those, there'd have to be some kind of boots on the ground type of changing up of repeaters and implementation of processes.
Is there any talk of maybe hardening those assets?
Yeah, there is.
Okay.
There is. So Monday night at the Judiciary and Law meeting, I'm requesting repurposing of some funds that we have to complete a study of our basically communication system within Dunn County. And where do we go? How do we improve it? And what kind of infrastructure do we need to build this out to be better than where we're at today and for the future? And, I'm sure that would be a big part of that study is how do we look at redundancy, not just performance wise, but redundancy and all of that. I'm sure that would be part of that study. So there is kind of some movement to look at that.
Right. Well, it was just a concern that I had when I saw the news about a tower going down,
Mhm.
which is a pretty dramatic action. And then also where these transformers were shot and power went out there. And all of a sudden you kind of go to yourself, think to yourself as an administrator,
Mhm.
like, okay, what happens when, in those situations? And so that's why I brought the question in.
Yeah.
I'm glad somebody's thinking about it already.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
thank you very much.
Like I said, right now there is some redundancy, but there's always room for improvement, and we are thinking about it. It is on the radar.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
I'm done.
Oh, thank you, Tim.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Supervisor Headland? I would ask that maybe we could invite Dan Dunbar up to just talk a little bit about, it was in his report, but he was just at a conference for a product called Qualtrics that we are getting free of charge, and I think it will have a lot of application to county, just trying to figure out priorities. If you don't mind.
Let's go ahead, Mr. Dunbar.
Yeah, so, oops, sorry. Yes, I went to this Qualtrics X4 Summit is what they call it. It's for a software that it started as a surveying software. They've kind of rebranded themselves into an experience management software, which is kind of a space that they developed themselves. The software that we got, as Chris mentioned, free of charge, is related to the city of Menominee and a grant that they had received, and they were nice enough to include us in that and involve us in having access to this software and actually partially paying for me to go to the conference as well. So it was good. The software, I'm familiar with it. It was something that they had at Stout, and I think they still have at Stout. But the conference was really built around, as they had mentioned, this experience management, and the goal that the chief of police, now future city administrator of the city, has, and I think really where that aligns with where Chris is looking at with the county, is around community engagement and how do we understand how the community sees Dunn County government, and how do we get their opinions from them, and then how do we respond. And so one of the big things around experience management, as they refer to that, is, so part of it's surveying, but part of it is listening, right? So getting all of that feedback that we receive on social media, and we can talk about it however we want. It's feedback, it's people's opinions, it's what they think, and they don't always have to think good things. But we need to then take that feedback. We need to throw out our own opinions, and we need to look at that and understand what people are asking us to do to see if we need to make changes. If we ask for feedback, if we look for feedback and we don't do anything about it, we actually just wasted time and money. So as we're going out there and receiving that feedback, how do we close that loop and make changes within the county that will better serve the needs of our people? And once again, sometimes that feedback that we get isn't, you should do this. It sometimes comes in different ways, and so part of that is interpretation around that. But truly thinking about how we are building our services and putting our services together in a way that is serving the community, as opposed to serving ourselves or running the process the way that the process has always been done. Looking at what is that impact from the user side. So that's really where a lot of the focus was on that. And the software itself is really about being able to receive that feedback and to gather it together in nice, easy dashboards with graphs similar to the graphs that Jenna had shared earlier, right? This is where that sentiment is coming out. The software has some AI in it that can do evaluation of text. So that's one of the big things, is you survey somebody, you ask for text, it just comes back as a whole bunch of text that you want to do. So this thing can evaluate that text and say, you know what, it seems like these people are really mad about something, or this is good feedback. And so it can kind of categorize that and save some time as it goes through there. So it's really useful. We're very early on in kind of looking at how we would do that. As I look at Jenna over there, and I haven't talked to her about it, but employee experience is another item that they look at a lot, is that customer experience, that community experience is very much based on the attitudes of your employees. If your employees aren't happy, they're not going to provide good customer service. So to be able to evaluate and get feedback from our customer, our employee base, as well as as the community is some of the things that we're looking at there. So that's my summary of what we ran into there, what that conference is all about. And I think, you know, we're evaluating it, and I do think we'll be looking at some employee engagement things. That we do have an employee engagement work group, but, you know, expanding some of that, and then also looking at the services we provide and responding to the citizens. So,
If I may I have a question. All right. How is this different than like Facebook?
So Facebook would be one of those mechanisms in which you would receive feedback. So you can utilize this software to kind of pull that information in and allow it to.
So it actually massages the info that you get from these other sources then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And so, yeah, so there's surveys, but there's other mechanisms in which we can receive that feedback and get it all into there.
So use your example, Dan, of where we did where we provided feedback about just send the damn form.
So, yeah, so I did create a feedback form on our webpage. You know, it's just asking really with the Dunn County webpage. So you were on this page. Do you like this page? Why were you here? Were you here just browsing? Were you looking for something? Did you want to apply for something? So I click, yeah, I was trying to apply for something. And then it said, did you find what you were looking for? No, I didn't find what I was looking for. And then there's a free text field that tells us what you're looking for. And part of that is to close the loop, right? So the system then can automatically say, hey, this person just answered no, they couldn't find something on our webpage. And then they told us what they were looking for. If we ask for their information, I can come back to you and say, hey, you were looking to apply for a rural address form. Here's the link in order to do that, right? And then maybe we can get a little bit of feedback. All right, so what path did you go down in order to try and find this? Because if you are unable to find it, it's likely other people are unable to find it. And then in that text area, yes, I did type in, what was it? Just couldn't find the damn form, right? So it recognizes that text, and that survey actually recognized the language in there and said, hey, this person is mad, right? This is it's a negative feeling that somebody has. So it's even more important to respond back to that, because there's frustration that's happening there, and we can close that loop if we just get back to it. So that's some of the value of a system like that. But part of that is also just Chris and I talked about that, the cultural change within staff and everybody to say, you know, we are going to spend our time, right? This person isn't just complaining. This person has an issue, and we need to solve it. So
it sounds like a good tool. So then how do you get it out there? Like, do you do what you say with that form, or do you actually have to kind of create some mechanisms to try and harvest some of that opinion, or stage something, you know, where it's like a community participation or all of the above? Or
yeah, so yes, therein lies the ultimate issue, right? So Facebook is one of those things where people are very open to provide feedback, right? In an anonymous, well, it's not necessarily in an anonymous fashion, but not in a way that we can really get back to them. But that's where surveying also can just be anonymous. Feedback on a web page is another way of doing that. Yes, different campaigns as we're running all of these videos, you know, what else do you want to find out? Really just kind of asking that. And part of getting responses, getting more feedback back is it's almost a chicken and egg thing, right? If you start to respond to feedback, people are more likely to provide it. Because if you're just hollering into an empty room, it's not worth it. So
Get off my lawn.
Right. So I think that is part of it, that we are receiving feedback. And so we need to start looking at that and responding to that. And once we start demonstrating that we will receive that feedback, we will respond to it, then we're more likely to, hey, fill out this survey and tell us what you think about something. I'll tell you, because maybe you'll fix it now.
right.
So that I think is the biggest piece of that. But yes, any mechanism we can to try and get feedback.
Cool.
We'll just put that as a footer to all the questions. Do you happen to be a CNA as well?
Yeah, it's here.
All right. All right. Anything else?
Anyone else? Thanks, Dan.
Mhm.
Appreciate it. I have a question for our county clerk. If you would, please.
No autographs.
Yes,
Okay.
Supervisor Headland.
I see in the local paper, a number of the townships and communities who have added Badger books recently apparently are putting on demonstration meetings or gatherings, I guess they're calling them. Are they new to you had in your report, there was 12. Are there more now since that information?
That's a good question. So for the February 21st spring primary in 2023, there were 7 municipalities that were using Badger books. There will be 12 municipalities that will be using Badger books for the April 4th, 2023 election. So just kind of as those orders have come in, they've been doing that that way. I've been traveling out to the different municipalities to do kind of one-on-one training with the election inspectors to make sure that it's not all the pressure hasn't been put on the municipal clerk and we can kind of work through it together. So we've been doing several ones of those, and that will just kind of continue as we go forward. So there will be 12 for April, and then I have an additional interest from 12 more municipalities. So if I gave the municipal clerks, I'll have a July 1st deadline. So we have to get through this election first. It'd be really great. And then what we'll do is buckle down. And so several of them would need approvals from their town boards. So I've been going out to different town board meetings and making a presentation, answering questions from any of the board members that have questions about them. And so we'll be doing that as well. So I wanted to give them a time frame to say, after we get through the election, if it's in your May meeting or your June meeting and you want me to come out because you need approval for it for your half, we'll do that. So I've been to the town of Menominee, city of Menominee, village of Knapp, Lucas, a couple of the other ones. Yeah. So that's the plan. And so there's 12 additional municipalities that have expressed interest in being part of the next and what I think would be final phase of the Badger book purchasing. So they'll have till July 1 to do that. And then that way we'll have 24 of the 30 municipalities in Dunn County using them for the 2024 election cycle, which will be the big one. What we'll do is actually have the Wisconsin Election Commission is going to come to Dunn County in the fall, and we'll do a huge county-wide poll worker training on the Badger books. So anybody who's used them before can come get a refresher, but there'd be 12 additional municipalities. So doing that, so everyone's on the same page with that. That would make, if it happens, that would give us coverage of, I think it was 82% of the residents of Dunn County using Badger books, would make Dunn County the leader in the state of Wisconsin for the number of Badger books per voting populace. So I'm not saying that they should give out awards, but if the Wisconsin Election Commission is listening,
I'd like to thank the Academy.
yes, does that make sense? Any other questions on that, Supervisor Headland?
No, and thank you, because I saw those notices in the paper and then when I checked your report again and I thought, oh, there's 12, is there another 5 or but possibly another 12.
Possibly not 12, yeah, so. we'll
Excellent.
see.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Anyone else? All right, very good. Next, consideration action taken by this committee, review the vouchers. Do we have any questionable voucher payments that anyone would like to bring up? Mr. Bauer.
Chair, yes. I'm actually gonna go back to last month's. I know Chris was gonna get back to me on an answer for one we had last month on Jeffrey Prince. You're gonna find out who that was. And Andrew is gonna get back to me on the libraries thing, because you had the cost up here, but the cost didn't match what you had down below.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry about that. I didn't receive an answer. I'm just kind of curious if you guys got a chance to look at that.
Yes, there was the discrepancy that we talked about last month. And that was just because of a accounting component. It was spread out over 2 different months. And so part of it had been paid out at the end of December and part of it had been paid out in January. So there was that discrepancy. Yep. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so your main report just had it all in one and then just split up later. Okay, thanks.
Yep. So don't worry, all the libraries got their money. It's all good.
I'll find your answer while you guys do other things and break in when I've got it.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I have
Mr.
you.
Okay,
Okay. On the first page under risk management, I see property insurance here under Wisconsin Mutual Insurance for $125. I really have 2 questions on that. What property are we insuring for $125? And can I get in on that deal? And then I really didn't think we were connected into Wisconsin County Mutual.
Wisconsin County Mute.
Primary insurance.
There it is.
There we go. Big hammer.
Billions of dollars of technology can be taken down by a loose fitting. Wisconsin County Mutual Insurance Corporation is our primary liability insurance carrier. They also, I think a subunit or subsidiary of them, or maybe them, they also have our workers' comp
Oh.
coverage also.
Okay. But I was just wondering, what property are we insuring for only $125?
That I do not know.
Okay.
it says it's under risk management. Is that just the equipment that's at the risk management office? Is that insured separately?
I can look into that with Patty Isaacson. She would know off the top of her head. but-
Okay. Not a
There you
problem. I
go.
just saw that and that seems like a small number just for, property insurance. That's all. Okay, and then under 1150, the treasurer report, I see we have a payment of $1,250 to PFM Asset Management. I kind of thought we were done with them.
Nope, we're still working on it.
Well, we're still working on it. Okay. So until then, we still have to pay for them, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
So that
Alright.
was the piece that came to the county board a week ago,
Okay.
a couple weeks
Yeah.
ago. And then we had to send them the resolution to the new place and we have to get it all set up and
In process.
in process.
Okay. And then. Okay, where is it here? Under emergency management, 1250. $10,000 payment to Onsolve Intermediate Holding for 10,000. I'm just kind of wondering, any idea what that is? Okay. Or if you can just holler at me from there.
Sure.
Well, it would be good to have this
Oh.
as part of the audio.
We're getting your steps in for you too.
Absolutely. So that $10,000 payment is for our mass notification system that we have in Dunn County.
Oh.
We've had it for several years and this year we increased, the availability of it. So the cost did increase a small amount. I think we were paying between $7,000 and $8,000 before, but we had a limited number of minutes that we could use both for voice and texting to notify the public of emergencies or different things like that. We did some research and we realized that there were a lot of other departments in Dunn County than just emergency management or communications that could use this a mass notification system. And we looked at increasing it to basically unlimited amount of use. And so we opted to kind of increase that to that unlimited, which then brought it to $10,000. So that's what that is for the mass notification. And the system is called Code Red, if you've ever seen us do any advertising on it.
Okay, I just, it hadn't really, my eye didn't catch the
Mhm.
unsolved intermediate holdings. It was just
Yeah.
not something we've seen before. At
There's
least
been
I
a,
haven't.
yeah, there's been a name change. It used to be called Code Red.
Okay.
The actual company that we still work with or the division is still called Code Red, but it's owned by Onsolve now.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yep.
And then. No, I think we're done with you. All right, and then under patrol 1270. I'm seeing multiple things here for body armor. And then at the bottom of the page, I see a also body armor for $576.50 to Richard Cowell Tactical LLC. And I'm kind of thinking, if we're already buying it from one place, why are we buying it from another? Under 1270.
Can you spell Cal? You say Richard Cal? What was the name?
The name was Richard Cowell, Cowell, Technical LLC. And I didn't know if this was, body armor for a canine or, smaller amount. That kind of thing.
Gotcha.
So anyway, just wondering about that one. And I think, oh no, one more. Under 9100, I'm seeing general obligation bonds. And then under the cost element name, third-party administration fees. And so I'm kind of thinking, wait a minute, that almost sounds like an HR term in my mind. And so I'm just wondering, it's for $475, Associated Trust Company, and I'm kind of wondering, those two just didn't jive in my mind.
So the third party administrator sometimes is just the intermediary between, so we would pay fees to, like we would pay fees to Baker Tilly. They might have some sort of filing or things that have to happen with related to that as well. So third
Alright.
party administrator is it's a healthcare term in terms of like insurance,
Yeah.
but it just means somebody's doing the work of somebody else.
In other words, we're sending them the money to send the money.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Anybody else? We're good to go? A motion to approve?
So moved.
Okay, second, Mr. Zahn's motion by Mr. Lino. Any other questions? Hearing none, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? And thank you, staff, for answering questions as we went along. All right. Consideration of reports, resolutions, and ordinances to the county board from this committee for the county board itself to consider. Under A, there's a resolution amending the employee handbook. Jenna, you want to speak to that? You've got a lot of work there.
While Jen is coming up, I can add that Jeff Prince owns Prince's Windshield Repair and Service, and he did some windshield repair for the highway department.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Before I start, I can also add, but I can't go into too far of detail. The $125 for Wisconsin Mutual Insurance Company is relating to 5 different endorsements that are $25 each. But I can get more detail on what those are and why. I just found the invoice, so I thought I'd give that update. Okay. All right, so on page 62 of your packet, I did provide a report regarding some proposed policy amendments relating to compensation policies and overtime. So I will start by outlining our proposal for the on-call pay policy. So currently, and for at least since the handbook was created, there was a provision labeled on-call pay policy, which was included in the wages and other forms of compensation policy that we will take a look at next. But what this provides is $1.60 per hour to only professional exempt employees that are scheduled to provide on-call services. And this was primarily utilized in the Human Services Department for social workers that had to be on call for statutory reasons. This hasn't been reviewed in several years, so that's part of the reason why we are bringing it forward to you today. But also because there are other departments that have a need to schedule employees on call, and there's a mix of hourly and salaried employees that are subject to this. So because the current policy only addresses professional exempt employees, we are proposing to bring in more of the applicable employees and departments. So we assembled a work group with the departments that have a need to schedule on call or just any sort of 24/7 support in the county, just to make sure that we considered all factors in putting together this new policy. We identified that there is a need for on-call services in the Human Services Department, which has been the case for several years, the sheriff's office, specifically in the jail with the jail sergeants, facilities, and that is specific to being on call to report to the neighbors of Dunn County specifically, and as well as the highway department. So they have a small group of supervisory employees that need to be on call for any emergency related reasons or things like that. So I do have the draft policy included in this report, and that would be on page 65 of your packet. Like I said, we had 4 departments that we identified this is most applicable to. So what we wanted to do was create its own policy because it got quite lengthy because we felt that we needed to break apart each department specifically just because of the specifics and the nuances in each business operation, basically. But in summary, what this does would be to propose compensating an increase from $1.60 per hour to $2 per hour for the social workers and caseworkers in human services that are assigned to be on call. So this is a rotation they have been doing. And as far as the estimated fiscal impact for that department specifically, it would be roughly $2,660 for a full year, just compared to what they've already been expending. So as described, the next department that we looked at was the highway. And again, they have that handful of supervisory employees that is required to be on call for emergency purposes. I believe 911 will sometimes give them a call if, there's a tree down or something like that. So that is a requirement based on emergency response in the county. And they have not been eligible for on-call pay of any sort leading up to this point. There are 2 of these supervisory employees that are hourly that have been subject to what's called the call-in pay policy, which I will also talk about later, which provides them with a guaranteed 2 hours at 1.5 times their regular rate of pay. So the 2 hourly employees in the highway have been receiving some sort of compensation for being on call, but it's just very different than an hourly on-call rate. So we are proposing to include them in to receive the $2 per hour for the times that they are scheduled to be on call. And I did provide an estimated cost for the highway department would be about 10,600. I will say it's hard to really pinpoint it because I went back 5 years and tried to determine what call-in pay costs. So that's that guaranteed 2 hours at time and a half. What how much that was expended over the last 5 years compared to the overall cost of this $2 per hour. So can anticipate about a $10,000 increase with that. I will say, in talking with the departments that are applicable to this policy, we are confident that the increase in costs can be absorbed for fiscal year 2023, just due to a number of vacancies, and I will talk more about that a little bit later as well. Any questions on human services and highway before I move on to the other two?
Yeah, go ahead, Supervisor Rogers first.
So that's an additional pay when they're working, not for just being on call.
It would, so this would be for time that they're scheduled to be required to be available while they're actually not working. So only $2 per hour will be paid. This will be like nights and weekends only while they're off shift.
And currently we don't pay them.
Correct, not the highway group. The 2 hourly are compensated that call in pay. So that's only if they receive a call that they respond to, but there hasn't been any sort of per hour compensation for their on-call services.
How many employees are gonna be on call? Is this all of the people that are gonna plow roads are on call?
No, nope. So it's really only one person. So in the highway department, for example, one person, one supervisory person has to be on call to be able to receive calls from 911 or citizens or something, or residents or something like that, to be able to then dispatch, if they need to send a plow truck or something like that. That would be addressed in, like, for a plow truck driver in a different situation, the call-in pay would apply for them. Does that help? So really only one person at a time would be receiving the call-in pay of the $2 per hour. Yep, and that is the same for the social workers and caseworkers. They only need to have one on call for the nights and weekends. It's not several. Okay.
I've got
Sorry about that.
I've got a quick question. As I read through your report, it's a wonderful report, but it made my head hurt.
It was like,
okay,
it's been a very
how does this work?
complicated process.
Yeah. So just to kind of come back to Supervisor Rogers' point. So we don't pay them anything at this particular time, the highway workers. So now we're gonna be paying them $2 an hour if they're on call. So let's say tree falls on Highway 29. Guy goes out, checks it out and says, yeah, there's a tree down. Does he have to, go back and say, call up Joe and say, come on, Joe, we need you in the truck to go cut up this chunk or get it off the road, sort of thing.
That's correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
then they would receive time and a half for that time that they were out there moving that tree off the highway.
By they, do you mean the highway
The
worker,
highway
the
worker and
operator?
another guy.
So the highway worker would then get called in by the supervisor.
Okay,
They would receive time and a half at a minimum of 2 hours of pay. The worker, the supervisor that called them in, they'll receive that $2 per hour for the time frame they're on call. If it's an hourly supervisor, they will also receive their regular rate of pay for the time that they're actually working. And that is per a requirement of the Fair Labor Standards Act, just that they need to be paid for time that they're
would
performing
they
work.
receive that pay from the time that they received the call? Drove into the shop to pick up a piece of equipment or whatever it might be at this time?
Correct.
Okay.
For any amount of time that they're spending performing duties, I would say from the point of the call until they were able to take care of it. I think it's very common that they just have to make a phone call. They don't even have to leave their house. They're able to call a highway operator to report to the highway shop and then go. I mean, there may be situations where they actually have to physically drive somewhere,
Yeah.
but it generally, it could be a pretty quick phone call. And that was part of the concern too with call-in pay at some points. It's like how it is now with the hourly supervisors. If they do receive a phone call, whether it takes 5 minutes, they're getting paid 2 hours at time and a half. So in some cases, how that's been being paid versus how we're proposing it would offset each other a little bit is what would be expected. The salaried supervisors would just get that $2 per hour. They don't punch in and out, obviously. So that's just an additional,
Okay, well, thank you for clearing that up.
of
I
course,
appreciate it.
no problem.
Yep, Mr. Chair, if I may, yep. You said you might get to this question or answer later on as you talk about this, but on paper, everything looks good that they can all observe it, but the year that highway's having, are they gonna be able to absorb this? I mean, it looks like they'll probably be over budget anyway.
The highway specifically?
Yeah, well, and most of them probably could absorb it, but highway, I would assume would be over budget with the year we had, so. Would they should
Right.
be able to absorb it? That's what, it looks good on paper, but it isn't.
Sure,
really gonna be,
sure.
so.
It's anticipated, and I don't know if you want to chime in on that, but
I was gonna say, I don't know that they necessarily are going to be over budget at this point in time. I mean, they do budget a certain amount. Some of that won't be known until late in the year because we'll hit another winter season at the end of the year. But, they do have a fair amount of money set aside for winter maintenance. So, where they're at exactly with that, I'm not, I don't, we'll know here now when we get to the next run of our financials. But I don't know that there's anything to say that they're necessarily are running super over at this point in time.
and if I may, but if it got to the point where there needed to be a budget contingency requested, obviously that would come forth and need to be reviewed. And at that point in time, when we determined they weren't able to absorb, and then it would have to we'd probably have to look at other areas to reduce if that were to not be approved at that point in time. But that is not anticipated to be the need.
So a follow-up on that as well. So are we getting rid of the 2-hour pay and putting in the $2 an hour so they don't have a 2-hour show up for a 5-minute phone call?
For only the supervisors in the highway that are on call. That is correct. We're not fully removing the call-in pay, which is the 2 hours guaranteed time and a half, because that would still apply to the hourly non-supervisor employees that do physically report to, take care of whatever they need.
But someone making a phone call is not going to get paid 2 hours anymore.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yep.
That makes sense.
Okay, so I'll just kind of go through the other two departments that this would apply to would be facilities. And like I mentioned earlier, they are required to have somebody on an on-call rotation to be able to respond to the neighbors. I can't cite that requirement specifically, but somebody in the state requires it. So we included them in on this. That would be one person that would be on call for nights and weekends, and they would get paid $2 per hour. They currently have not received any call-in pay up to this point, or I'm sorry, on-call pay up to this point. It's just been managed the same way as we just described, like a highway operator, where if they do get called in, they have to perform duties. They get compensated for 2 hours at time and a half pay at least. So this is kind of the flip side. Would put them on the on-call pay provision. Instead, they would get $2 per hour for the full time frame. If they need to respond to a call, they would just get paid their regular rate of pay for the time that they're actually spent performing duties. Any questions on facilities?
Mr. Rogers, go ahead.
So if they come in on overtime, you don't have to pay them time and a half?
If it is a true overtime situation, we would be required to pay time and a half. So that's if they truly had worked 40 hours that week already. So most of the time it would be a Saturday, right? They put in a full week. If they get called in on a Saturday, that would likely be all subject to overtime. That is correct. Mhm. If it were to happen on a Sunday, which is the first day of the work week, the supervisor and manager could manage that to maybe where they would leave early later in the week to avoid accruing overtime pay. And that would just be kind of a matter of trying to manage the overtime exposure, which we would recommend for supervisors.
All right. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so lastly, it would be the sheriff's office. So they have a need to have their jail sergeants be on call for the times that there isn't a sergeant scheduled to be in the jail, which is not quite as often as the other departments, but still often enough that it has been brought to our attention that they haven't been receiving any sort of compensation for being on that on-call rotation. And that can make it difficult, you know, if they were trying to switch with their peers to cover and things like that, just because there isn't really an incentive to do it. So we are proposing for the $2 per hour just to be available to the supervisory jail employees. And the anticipated cost for the jail, and again, this is offsetting what's been expended in call-in pay, would be about $4,326. And in talking with the sheriff, they do have several vacancies right now, unfortunately, but fortunately that would more than allow this expected financial impact to be absorbed.
Chairman, I have a question.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, in regards to the jail, I don't know where this applies, because aren't they subject to a union contract?
The jail employees are not. No,
Oh, they are not.
only the sheriff deputies are part of the
Okay.
union here at the county.
All right, thank you.
Mhm. You're welcome. Any other questions on the on-call pay policy? All right, we'll move on to the next one. Okay, so the next item that we looked at was the wages and other forms of compensation policy, which I had mentioned previously that on-call rate lived within that policy. We're going to pull that out. So obviously the first change that we need to make to that is removing the on-call pay language for that policy specifically. So you can see that in the red marked draft that I have on page 67. You can just see that on-call pay language being removed due to the separate policy being proposed. And then the other piece that we looked at was training pay specifically. So currently that compensates only correctional officers and telecommunicators a total of 50 cents per hour for time spent that they are training other new hire employees. And we looked at this specifically relating to the 911 center because they have had several vacancies in the last 2 years where there are at least 2 or 3 employees that have basically been training new employees on a rotating basis. And essentially, if you work an 8-hour shift, you get paid an extra 50 cents per hour. That's $4 extra for that day. And I won't put Melissa on the spot, but she could speak to what that very hands-on, side-by-side training entails, but it really is a significant undertaking for those staff members that have been constantly doing that. So in an effort to retain the tenured staff that we have in 911 and also the jail, we are proposing to increase from 50 cents per hour to $3 per hour. And I understand that feels like a very drastic change. We did do some research and some comparisons to other organizations, and $3 per hour was the competitive rate for this type of incentive pay. The anticipated cost for that would be $1,120, and that's just based on an average of 5 years, how much training pay was expended compared to what it would cost at the $3 per hour versus the 50 cents. And then for the sheriff's office, it would be anticipated to be about $1,806 to increase that form of payment. Any questions on training pay?
You go.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. That one is a little bit more simple than on-call pay, I do have to say. So the other piece in the within the wages and other forms of compensation policy is the voluntary shift incentive pay. So currently there is a section within that policy that exists. If you look at page 68, the 5th paragraph down starts to outline this type of provision that already exists and is available to only neighbors employees. So CNAs, LPNs, and registered nurses. So what we realized is the neighbors isn't the only 24/7 operation that struggles and has a need to fill vacant positions, and especially following over 2 years of several vacancies in the 911 center specifically. We do have a need to review, and what we are proposing is to also include an incentive pay for their staff to pick up open shifts. So what we have provided here would be an additional $5 per hour for telecommunicators who accept additional hours on a voluntary basis. And that would be within or more than 48 hours prior to, and then $7 per hour for voluntarily filling a shift on a short notice, which would be less than 48 hours. And again, it's one of those departments, just like the neighbors, where there needs to be somebody in that role. And I would say that it's been their employees have done a tremendous job picking that up. That hasn't been always an issue, but there is also a lot of shifts that management is picking up very consistently as well. So again, the intent with this proposal is to enhance the retention and also use it as a recruitment tool for that department specifically. So the estimated fiscal impact, I mean, again, this could vary, but on average lately, there's at least 5 open shifts per week. And that's every week, just because of how short-staffed they are. And then at least 1 shift that needs to be filled on short notice. So like if someone calls in sick or if something happens like that. So we used those averages to figure the cost would be roughly $13,312 per year to add that incentive pay. And that is only for the 911 department. And again, due to all the vacancies, there is a lot of wiggle room within the budget this year to be able to absorb that. The goal and the hope, if at some point they can reach full staffing, is that it wouldn't be used nearly as often. So the cost would go significantly down for future years as long as we could raise the staffing levels to an acceptable level. Any questions about that?
Mike Rogers, Supervisor Rogers, go ahead.
So it sounds like a lot of money per hour, but I understand when you have the vacant spots, they have to get filled, and that what's happening now isn't working. But in addition to the $5 or $7 an hour, are they still getting overtime on top of that?
They would get overtime if it's a true overtime situation, right? So it would be the end of the work week after Friday into Saturday.
Which how
They have
much-
a different type of rotation too, so that complicates things, but potentially would be receiving time and a half as well as $5 per hour, $7 per hour, depending on the situation.
And I'm
Yes,
assuming everybody that we have is already putting in a full week.
right.
So it's not like we have extra hours laying around. So, all right, thank you.
I will say too, just with the amount of shifts that management has picked up, management being salaried, they don't receive extra compensation for that. So there's an offset there as well. As far as extra shifts being picked up, there isn't overtime expenses being paid out to a management employee who is exempt from overtime.
And I think it's important to point out, you say management, which applies a plural.
Yeah, it's not plural. I just didn't want to put anyone on the spot. Melissa is the only manager right now in that department. So shout out to Melissa for keeping her department afloat and doing a really great job at it. Mhm.
Thank you for all your hard work. It seems unfair.
Any questions on the voluntary incentive pay?
Do you think this will be a recruiting tool?
That's our hope. But
Okay.
honestly, the focus mostly with this is retention. They're, as you can imagine,
Yeah.
very burned out. Compensation isn't always going to prevent burnout, of course, but step one is retention. We'll get some recruitment in there and we can retain the employees that we do on board.
Okay.
I think,
Mhm.
Melissa, you have 12 potential positions and you're at 7? 8.
And then, yeah. Mhm. And I may not have this exactly right, but the training process to onboard a new employee takes at least 3 to 4 months before they can really be on their own on the floor. Mhm.
They can share that if they need to.
I do want to add, right, because again, it's not all about compensation. We are putting a lot of focus into providing support for these employees as well, because it's been a really tough couple of years for them, and we want a wraparound approach to improving that situation.
If I may.
Go ahead.
All right. These employees are in a situation where they're, if they're required to come in, okay. And if they have family, childcare, boy, I'll tell you, are we offering anything that in regards to that to help? Emergency childcare stuff on,
Not,
I mean,
yeah.
I can't come in because I got nobody to watch my,
Mhm.
2-year-old here.
Right. Or an argument could be made to, this extra $7 per hour would likely pay for the babysitter that they find last minute, if it's not a family member.
Good luck with that.
Right, right. But I will say too that the childcare topic is definitely being discussed and has been identified as an issue that we would like to work on in the very near future.
Well, I don't know how you'd solve that situation other than, in the neighbors, you might, is it possible to bring a baby in and say, okay, she can sleep here, that kind of thing,
Mhm.
so you can get coverage? It's just a thought. I'm just kind of spitballing here.
I think all creative ideas are welcome. And of course, there's a lot of considerations for all of them, but
Yeah.
it's definitely the time to be talking about it.
Supervisor Lena, are you offering your babysitting services?
I'm in bed by then.
I would so move.
And not to get off topic, if I may, just on this subject, I mean, Chris recently went to a conference and they identified that most of the time a parent or parents will need to get on a waiting list at a daycare at least 2 years before. So there isn't even a child yet and they're securing daycare. And that's kind of how drastic the situation has gotten.
So Supervisor Lena, a good opportunity for you.
Put my card right next to
All right,
It's a dire situation.
it is.
Appreciate you working through it.
Sure. This is only a very small piece of the puzzle. Any questions on that before I move on to the overtime policy? Okay.
Jenna, I would just say, even circling back to the on-call pay, some of that is driven by the fact that we're trying to be competitive with other counties who offer that kind of compensation at a higher rate, or if we don't at all, or at a higher rate than we do, and trying to just say, I know in the social work world, they regularly surveyed all the counties and you could see what everybody paid. And this would put us kind of in the middle, certainly not at the top.
Mhm. Agreed. Okay, so lastly, I have some drafted changes to the overtime policy, which you would see on page 71 of your packet. So again, to address those employees that we are proposing to receive the $2 per hour, we made an amendment to this overtime policy, which includes that call-in pay provision, to basically say if they're receiving that $2 per hour, they won't be receiving call-in pay, right? So you don't get both sides. So that was the main addition or the main change to that policy. And then as well as just adding some clarifying language to say that only those employees that have to physically report to work in person when they're called in will receive that guaranteed time and a half at 2 hours. And this, it's few and far between, but this would limit, any sort of like, if someone's able to work remotely and they just need to check an email for 5 minutes because their supervisor called them, needed it urgently, that would remove the need to pay that employee, 2 hours at time and a half minimum. So I'm just trying to make a responsible clarification to that provision. And lastly, a couple years ago, a change was made to the compensatory time policy. So it's our comp time policy relating to prohibiting the ability for employees to use and or accrue comp time in the last 3 pay periods of the year. And the purpose of that is because due to WRS standards, we need to pay out any remaining comp time that was earned within the same calendar year because it has to be paid out at the rate that it was earned at. So we've gotten some feedback from employees that it's difficult sometimes in the, towards the end of the year to make sure that they're using their comp time versus, because we encourage them to use it so we don't have to pay it out because that is a cost to the county. So we reviewed it as an HR and payroll department, and we said, how much time do we actually need to process these payouts? So, a couple of years ago, it was decided, let's take 3 pay periods to be able to, run the report and then enter the manual payouts. We decided as a team to allow more time for employees to use that comp time, right, to bring that payout amount down, that we would propose to change the cutoff, and now bear with me, to following the last day of the 25th pay period. So for in 2023, that would be December 2nd versus early November would be kind of when that cutoff starts, if we were to stick with how it's worded currently. So that was just a change that we wanted to make while we were already reviewing this policy, and is in an effort to reduce the amount of payouts that are taking place at the end of the year for comp time. And let's be honest, there's some departments really want to use their comp time during deer hunting. So we wanted to be able to kind of, have some benefit to the employee as well, to be able to use the time for the time that they want to use it for, rather than scrambling to use time at any other point in the year. If they're like my husband, they use all of their vacation that week. So. Any questions on that? There is actually a anticipated savings. I don't have a number for that, but we would be able to track, this year, the payout versus last year to see if that does provide a savings. And I can definitely circle back on that when it happens.
I have one question, just kind of the mechanics of that. And the reason that we can't do the comp time is strictly an accounting rule, or is it a state reg, or what is it?
So it's specific to the Wisconsin retirement system requirements, where comp time that is earned, if it's not used, has to be paid out at the rate that it was earned at. So if we allowed comp time to roll over year to year to year to year, as you can imagine, in 2024, my rate of pay is going to be different than 2023. And so it is an accounting issue, but in an effort to be compliant with WRS requirements. That's the nature of why the change was made a couple years ago. It did used to roll over year to year.
Okay.
So
is
that's-
there, other than time away from work, is there another option that where maybe you could be placed into their retirement account if they should so choose, or something like that as an alternative?
I would have to look into that, but I do believe that it's pretty specific. So, right, this is starting as overtime pay. The Fair Labor Standards Act allows employees to voluntarily take comp time if the employer provides it.
Mhm.
I believe that has to be compensated if it's not used.
As
I
a
don't know that there's a
taxable.
whole lot of options there. Mhm.
Probably, yeah.
But we could look into it.
Just a thought, that's all.
Part of that is because the WRS has rates set
Mhm.
based on a vast amount of accounting for schools and counties and so forth. And so that came up, I remember when that came up as an issue, because that is calculated in to their payout. And so,
Like retirement time, that kind of
right.
thing? Okay.
so, it would be very advantageous, like you were saying, to roll that year to year to year, because 20 years from now, when I retire, I'll be getting paid a lot more, but it hasn't been paid in
Okay.
at that rate. Okay,
Mhm.
Mr. Rogers.
Comp time is overtime that
Mhm.
is paid back out at what rate?
So if an employee exceeds 40 hours in a work week, let's say they work 42 hours, 2 of those hours would be overtime eligible. The employee can say, nope, I want to take it as comp time instead. So this is time that I can bank to be able to take time off later. If and when that occurs, they would accrue 3 hours of comp time, because it's the 2 hours times 1.5 would equate to 3 hours. So it's translating at the 1.5 point when they earn the comp time. If they don't use it throughout the year, then they get paid out for 3 hours, basically on 2 hours that they actually worked. Does that help?
Yes, but it opens up a whole new avenue of questions.
Okay.
So when you're paying overtime, are you paying benefits at overtime, or are you paying benefits at straight time? So they're accruing retirement and healthcare, health insurance and all those benefits at the same time that they're earning their standard rate. Now, when you go into overtime, the pay goes to time and a half, but the benefits typically stay at straight time. You're still paying the same per hour for health insurance and for retirement and for all those benefits. If you now pay that out at time and a half, you're paying time and a half, which they earned, and the benefits at the same hourly rate as the other 40. When you roll that forward as comp time, you're paying time and a half on both the benefits and the regular base pay.
So I believe even when overtime's immediately paid out, there are some benefits that apply. So like WRS, the percentage of that would be payable on the actual gross pay. Health insurance and dental, you're right, that doesn't change based on like earnings within a certain pay period. There's also some really complicated formulas that need to take place just for FLSA in calculating that overtime rate and what does go into it. There are some certain incentive pays that play into an overtime calculation as well. But they're paying out 3 hours versus versus paying out 3 hours of overtime, I think would be very similar as long as it's within the same year.
But you're only paying out 2 hours of benefits where you're paying out 3 hours of benefits when you roll it into comp time. So when you start providing those benefits of allowing that time to be used as comp time, you're also paying out more on your wage. So as an employee, I would take the comp time, or I would take my overtime rolled forward at 3 hours for 2 hour, or doubling that benefits as well. So I do think that we're probably paying out more than what we budget for when you provide that option. And it's something that we should be aware of when you move forward and look at those things.
Sure. I will say, if 2 hours of 42 hours is worked in a week, they accrue 2 hours of overtime, that would technically pay at 3 hours because it's at time and a half. They're 1.5 times their regular rate of pay. So I think it's
What benefits are you referring to?
Your package with pay usually includes more than your base pay, your health insurance, unless I guess for the county it's self-funded, and your retirement and.
If you're a full-time employee, you receive the health insurance. If you take vacation that week, you still get health insurance that week. If if for some reason you can't make it in, you only work 38 hours, you still get the health insurance.
But that health insurance costs X number of dollars per week for that employee, right?
Yeah, but the amount of time that the employee works doesn't change the amount that the insurance costs.
But you just changed the number of hours the employee worked from 2 to 3 hours. So all of those things do change because you're not paying that employee 2 hours of benefits, you're paying the employee 3 hours of benefits. You're paying, and he's due, or she or they are due 3 hours of pay at time and a half. 2 hours at time and a half is 3 hours, but the benefits are still paid at regular rate. So you're paying an extra hour of all of the, I guess from my perspective, we pay a retirement, we pay health insurance, we pay supplemental insurance, we pay supplemental retirement, we pay a lot of perks or added benefits, all the benefits that you pay through most any union contract. The benefits are paid overtime, are paid at regular time. If you work 50 hours a week, you get 50 hours worth of retirement and you get 50 hours worth of health insurance paid. If you work 50 hours of 50 hours, you get paid your 40 hours plus 10 hours at time and a half. But the benefits don't get paid at time and a half.
True, the Wisconsin retirement is indexed to your wages or salary, right? I mean, we look at how much you make in a year, and then that's, you know, that. So the rate doesn't change because you work more hours. Someone who works for $4 an hour and works for 2 hours, or say $3, 3 hours, gets $12. Someone who works 2 hours at $6 an hour also makes $12. If that's all they work in the year, they're going to be equal.
So it's not based on hours worked, it's based on wages earned.
Correct. For Wisconsin
WRS.
retirement, yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, there are, so the hours worked are gonna have an impact on the wages you make. If, like, let's say you work every week, you get 3 hours of overtime. Your wages for the year are gonna be higher than anticipated. And it's gonna have an impact on your Wisconsin retirement formula.
Okay, and I guess to explain where I'm coming from, I pay a $20 an hour benefit package. So if I'm paying overtime the way that you're doing that, I would actually pay a $30 an hour benefit package instead of what I owe at $20. So it does start to add up over the course of time when but as you're telling me this, we're not paying based on hours, we're paying based on income. Or based on,
Well, the retirement system is indexed to income. The benefit package that I think that you have is I think it's not likely to be the same arrangement that the county has. We're self-insured, and so employees who are full-time receive a certain level of coverage. Employees who are part-time don't, right?
They can opt in for the full.
They can
cost if
opt
they
in,
want.
but it costs them to get there. But there's no breakdown as far as, between 20 and 22 hours and 22 and 24 and 24 and 26, et cetera. So you're either part-time or you're full-time, and full-time is, what is it, 30
At
hours?
least 30 hours. per
30
week
hours
on
or more.
average.
And so if you work more than 40 hours in a work week, you're entitled to 1.5 times compensation for each hour worked. But that doesn't change the cost of health insurance. It doesn't change the benefit that you receive for participating in the health insurance plan. It only changes the amount of your paycheck. And the comp time option allows the county to remove the liability for overtime work by allowing time off from work, like vacation, instead of adding money into the paycheck. And so if you take 2 employees who work the exact same schedule for the whole year, and they regularly work overtime, one of them chooses to get paid for overtime and one of them chooses to get comp time for overtime. I think they'll probably both get different WRS formulas, because one will have received more income.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it just allows the option. I don't honestly.
I understand. You've answered my question. And it doesn't, what I'm thinking doesn't apply to the county's way of paying. So. you've
Unless you're
answered my
looking at the
question.
employee contribution would change if they were doing it that way, I think is what you're looking at, right? The employee contribution?
No, not really, but
Okay, all right.
you answered my.
No, I
question.
mean.
Well, and I
if-
think the only other piece that would, the piece that it would be limited to the people that were actually getting paid out for comp time, who didn't use their comp time. I mean, if there was any consideration, I think of what you're saying, it would be at the end of the year for someone who had comp time that they were not able to use. Otherwise, it's definitely a benefit to us to have people take comp time assuming that they can take the time off than it is for us to pay the time and a half of overtime.
And that's the reason for the WRS rule, so that the income can be measured in the year that the comp time was accrued, because it is a substitute for legally required overtime. It's an option that's allowed by state and federal law. And it's compensation, and WRS needs to know how much it's the employees who participate in the program earn in each year. And so that's the reason that they have the rule is so that the amount of income that each participant in the Wisconsin retirement, how much income they earn in each year can be measured and known. So that there aren't any, because it's a benefit, it's a substitute for income. So that's why they're able to get the work done for payroll, done a little quicker than we had previously thought. And so that's the reason that they're suggesting the policy be changed. And it inures a benefit to employees too, because then they're able to take a little more time off toward the end of the year than they otherwise might have been. And again, it removes monetary liability for the county. If you owe somebody money, it's a liability, and you got to pay them. That's all.
Sorry, I got us sidetracked and in the weeds there.
They're good questions.
I do have a question. Do you think it would be helpful if at a future meeting I kind of brought like a copy of a dummy pay stub, and then I can explain kind of how the benefits are compensated each pay period?
I think I understand pretty well
Okay.
now. I wouldn't mind seeing that. That would be really nice, but I'm pretty sure I got a pretty clear view of how it works.
Okay,
It's just different.
I know I'm just very visual, so I always thought I'd offer that. That is actually the end of my report. So we are asking the committee to consider the proposed changes. We did have a resolution drafted, and that's provided in the packet. And that would go forth to the executive committee with your approval. And we would propose an effective date of April 1. So by the time this would be seen by the board, there would be a couple of weeks of retro, which we are able to accommodate. But I just wanted to be forthcoming about that. Any further questions for me?
Because these changes all impact compensation, they need to be approved by the county board.
I'll make a motion. Oh, go ahead.
Supervisor
I
Zahn?
was gonna do it, but you beat me.
Sorry.
All right, okay. Motion has been made, excuse me, by Supervisor Leno and seconded by Supervisor Zahn. Any other concerns or questions? Hearing none. All in favor? Again, the resolution is printed in your packet. Please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. This will go forward to the county board for its consideration by the board
Executive is, I thought,
And then the board, right?
and the board,
Yep.
end of the board. Yes.
eventually the board.
See you in a few days.
I hope it works.
Thank you.
Anything else for us, Jenna, that you wanted to bring up? I'll let you off though. Okay. Thank you, though. And I know just being on this committee, time we have that the backlog of work that our HR department built up over the time that we did not have enough staff in that department and continued to deny the request for extra staffing is catching up to us now. And so hopefully our staff can get us totally caught up. A lot of these issues have needed attention and never received it. All right. Next is a resolution recognizing Workers' Memorial Day. And I guess the way I like to look at this resolution is that we have a Memorial Day which honors the veterans who have served in our military service. And this is to honor the veterans of community service, such as highway workers, police staff, and people who have died during the time they were actually at work, serving the needs of the populace of this area. And so I would so move myself that we consider passing this resolution. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Zons. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, the resolution is approved.
I
Oh,
gotta say all in favor.
we're all in favor, I'm sorry. All in favor to get the resolution approved. Aye. Thank you.
Skipped a step there.
Hoping nobody was gonna turn me down. But I better give him a chance.
Yeah.
All right, next meeting is coming up April 27th. Almost the end of the month again, 2023. It's proposed to be here at 3 o'clock. Pending any other issues that would cause it to go to being Zoom. But it will be held April 27th, 2023. Any announcements by staff or by our administration? Okay, hearing none, we are adjourned. Thank you all.